Hey, Shalom. This is Soldier Kal-El with the tent team. And as a courtesy for all those new to Tabernacles, we come and help you build your tents. And we also teach you the skills that you need to learn to build your own tents and booths for the wilderness to come. The first key steps when it comes to building your tent, you want to have a strong team. Teamwork is going to be your best help. Next, you want to lay out the bottom, or some would call the tarp or footprint, to your tent. Make sure you gather all your items, your poles, your stakes, and let's go ahead and get those instructions out because we're going to need them. Before you set any piece of the tent down, you want to wipe down your tarp or footprint, and you also want to clear the ground of any rocks or stems or possible roots before you put the tarp down. Once the footprint is clean, then you're ready to lay your tent out and get started. For those of you who've been doing tabernacles for a while now, we're here to teach you the skills so that you can help others and pass on the trade, and so that everyone can be prepared for the wilderness to come. As you lay out your tent, you want to make sure it's fully laid out in a proper symmetry. That way, you have everything ready to go when it comes time to get the poles in. Do not start staking down before you put the poles in, though. Let's get a full layout and see what we're working with. Once we have our tent laid out and we reassess the instructions, then we can start getting the poles in. It's always important to make sure you shut all windows and doors as you start putting together your tent. Also, if you gotta step inside the tent, brothers, be mindful. Take your shoes off. Let's not track any mud. As you get the poles in, let's make sure to lay out the tent and make sure it's stretched in its proper symmetry. As things may have shifted, once things start coming together, let's start thinking about our stake points and our anchor points as far as rope and rainfly goes. Now, this is important. If you have roped anchor points and stake points, you always want to make sure your stakes are getting staked inward towards the tent. That way it gets a good anchor point. And as you stake down your rope anchor points, you always want to make sure the lines have great tension. That way nothing's loose or slack. It's worth mentioning right here, you want to have a decent mallet. The good mallets usually are the rubber tipped ones because they can work with on any stake versus a metal mallet. It's good to have a mallet that may have a hook in, that way you can take up any bad stake points, just in case. As you stake into the ground, make sure you're staking into firm ground. You don't want the ground to be too loose, otherwise your stake's gonna come right out. Avoid sand, avoid rocks, and avoid loose grass. It's very important that if you have to tie off any rope or any anchor points, you have suitable knots. You don't want it to get loose in the middle of the night. And remember, charity is key. If you see a man working on his tent, lend a hand. And remember, sisters, this is hard work. Listen, we work sun up to sundown to make sure and ensure that you and all your families are good to go and have no emergencies. All praises. All praise the Most High, sis. See that? We appreciate it. Make sure that your rainfly or your tarp is fully extended, avoiding any rain to fall onto the vulnerable parts of the tent. After staking, make sure you reassess all your points to make sure everything is nice and tight. Check for zippers and always make sure everything's properly aligned. And check around the tent. Make sure you didn't make any tears or holes. Remember, we're dealing with people's property in the end of the day, and we want to make sure they can use the tent next year. If you find any extra bags or any extra materials that you didn't need during the tent construction, make sure you put them nice and neat where the people can find it and they do not lose it. Always a reminder, make sure the doors are closed properly as you're putting up the tent. You don't want any critters like spiders or bugs to get in there. Toward the end, you should start seeing your tent come together with a great symmetry, all lines nice and tight, and nothing out of the ordinary. A tight rope should be plucked like a guitar string, not wobbling all over the place. You must make sure the job is done properly. redo it. Now we're getting somewhere. We look like we have a nice constructed tent. All praises to the Most High. Always a reminder, this is an example of what not to do. You want to make sure that your stakes are always staking inward towards your tent to give you great anchor points. You can't stake it outward, otherwise it's going to come out right out of the ground. See, this is how you do it. And brothers and sisters, here you have it, a perfectly constructed booth for the Feast of Tabernacles. Your tent always should come out in the best possible condition, like this. Even if it's not, like we mentioned before, don't be lazy. It's most important that these things are built properly so that you have no emergencies or issues in your stay in the wilderness. Now, sisters, don't get it twisted. If it's only 2 of y'all, don't get a Taj Mahal tent. We're not putting it up. Remember, come at a great time and early on, because it's best to build your tent when there's ample sunlight. Building a tent in the dark is not going to get it done. Asking someone to build your tent in the dark at night, that's not charity. That's selfishness. Let's do better. And that's all for today. So we'll see you next time, every year, for the Feast of Tabernacles. Shalom. Most High in Christ bless you all. Now, when it comes to safety and tabernacles and camping, listen, the best safety you can do is extra preparation, because that's the best thing that'll keep you safe. Make sure you have all your poles, all your stakes, extra tarps. And you know what? Bring a little extra for your neighbor, because that's charity. Let's not forget the rope, and keep a knife at hand, because you got to cut it.